So
Hello today, Emily. This is delightful because, again, I'm speaking with an author for the Logan Writers Festival who works under a pen name, Felix Long. Very exciting. Not to be confused with the singer, dancer, good-looking fella in Singapore, Felix Long.
that's right. I have a little reference on my website. I am not the Felix Long from Singapore. I can neither sing nor dance. He's over here. Tell him I said hi.
Wonderful.
Felix Long is actually Latin and Mandarin.
Yes, lucky dragon.
Felix is luck and Long is dragon.
Yes.
The luck dragon. Those of you who remember the never-ending story would remember Falcor, the luck dragon.
Oh my gosh, the trauma from that.
Oh, the horse.
The horse. Everyone talks about the horse.
Oh
my gosh. I never understood the ending as a child because it came out while I was a child. And I loved it because I was like, oh my gosh, a big fluffy long snake thing. What's this?
Yeah.
And then some people are like, it's a dragon. I'm like, it's not a dragon. What are you talking
Nah.
about? But it was so fascinating and so abstract.
Yes.
So it was one of those things that I'm like, oh my gosh, I could watch this forever. But then you've got the horse bit, which I'd skip. With a VCR, you sit there and you're like, I'm not looking at the screen. I'm fast forwarding, but I'm not looking at the screen. Look back quickly. Nope, still not looking. And then you'd come back to it when it's all done. And I'm like, okay, I can proceed now. But I never understood the ending about like, say my name, sort of.
Yeah.
Yeah. And give me a name.
From a stagecraft perspective, let's criticize that because that is a fine example of Chekhov's gun. Poorly used. What was his mother's name? Nobody knows. Nobody can tell you, but he had to shout his mother's name and name the princess by his mother's name. Was his mother's name ever mentioned that anyone remembers? No. So Chekhov's gun, for those of us watching who wish to be authors or already are, Chekhov's gun is a concept coined by Anton Chekhov, the Russian playwright. It's a very simple concept. If someone is shot in the third act, the gun has to be on the mantelpiece in the first act. So simple. So you seed everything you need before you actually need it. You need a fella called Joe, give him a walk online.
That's fantastic because I use that a lot in mystery and never had a name for the term.
There you go, the literary device, Chekhov's gun.
Chekhov's gun. That's used so often. I love it when that's used. I love it when something inconsequential at the very start of a book becomes a super key factor right at the end. It's really satisfying to have that cyclical motion. Yeah.
To connect the end to the beginning like an Ouroboros.
Oh, beautiful.
Okay, so I actually have a web article on that. I have a web article on the use of Chekhov's gun.
Excellent.
So check it out on my website, felixlong.co.uk, not to be confused with felixlong.com. That's worth checking out too. He's a very, very talented young man, but he's not me.
Oh, fantastic. So what other books have you written? You said you've written blog posts or articles on Chekhov's gun. What else have you got under your sleeves?
Check up my sleeve. I have, my first book was To Conquer Heaven. I described To Conquer Heaven as Dan Brown meets Big Trouble in Little China, for those of you who remember that awesome 80s film. One of Jack Burton's finest roles. Well, the only one, actually. So To Conquer Heaven was sparked by a single idea. And I find that all really good books have to be spawned by a single what if moment. Now, that what if moment for me, I had known for years that I wanted to write a book. It's one of those things that it's a dream you have in childhood and was probably seeded by Roald Dahl's The BFG, because there was one dream that was in a jar that just made me freak right out when I saw it there on the page. A little boy's dream, which was, I dreamed last night that I wrote the most exciting book in the world. And people were walking along the street reading it and bumping into each other, and brain surgeons were performing brain surgery while reading it. He went on and on about how this awesome book that he'd written. And then my mum walked in and said, I found your English homework and your punctuation and spelling is atrocious.
Oh, no.
So, but hey, Roald Dahl kept on keeping on and became one of the most beloved authors in English literature, despite the fact that English was not his first language. Got to give him extra kudos for that.
Oh, fantastic. I grew up with Roald Dahl's work, and it
yes.
is iconic. It is absolutely iconic. He was also, do you remember the TV show Around the Twist?
I do remember Around the Twist.
That
was a
was all
great
based
Australian
on
one.
his work, wasn't it?
Oh, was it transporting to an Australian setting?
Yes, I'm pretty sure Around the Twist was all based on Roald Dahl's work, because I remember the book about the pig and the lipstick. The lipstick that would, if you put it on, anyone who saw you with it on would want to kiss you. So I remember the story of that. I'm pretty sure that's Roald Dahl. And then he falls into a carnival pig pen and a big pig comes up to give him a smooch. But then I remember seeing it in Around the Twist as well. And that's an iconic part of childhoods. It's like Australian childhoods require Around the Twist.
I think so.
Yeah,
I think we should forcibly feed it or add it to the curriculum.
Yes, add it to school curriculum for
right
Australian fantasy and comedy.
Oh yes, right up there with Hating Alice and Ashley.
Oh my God, that gave me unrealistic expectations of what it was like to be a perfect student. I modeled myself after a mixture of Hermione and Alice and Ashley. Oh my goodness. Yep. Yeah. And then you've got Looking for Alibrandi.
Never really got into that one personally, but again, a wonderful Australian author.
Didn't get into it, but it's one of those ones that's just in the curriculum, as well as 2 Weeks with the Queen.
Again, missed that one too.
Little boy, his brother has cancer, he has leukemia, and he flies himself, like he's only a tiny tot, he flies himself to England, I think, or he's sending like letters to the Queen to ask her to send her best doctors to come and heal his little brother. It's tragic. It's absolutely tragic. I hated it. Like the ending was just really not what I wanted. But again, one of those curriculum stories, and I really wish they'd upgrade them, because by the time I was in high school, I'd moved to about 6 different schools, and I really wanted new stuff. I was rereading the same books and doing the same Shakespeare plays, and it was starting to get a little bit dry. So this is a really good opportunity for teachers and schools to find their new favorite authors for their curriculums.
You just said the word, the dry. My own daughter, for year 11 English, covered Jane Harper's The Dry. This was before it was made into a fantastic film, one of the best films I've ever seen, starring Eric Bana, the Hulk himself.
Oh, wonderful.
As Aaron Polk. I remember the character's name. It was a perfect example of some of the difficulties of storytelling in the crushed tree paper sandwich format, and then making it into the visual format. But they did such a good job that those of us who'd read the book and loved the book and were prepared to be utterly disappointed in the film were complete converts.
That's such a normal state to be, though. Often a film cannot really, like, without a lot of knowledge and passion and love for the book itself, they can't replicate what is in the book. And understanding the feelings that the readers go through is such an important part of then creating that into a film medium.
Yes.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Well, that's what we're all going for, isn't it? Selling our film rights. I once put an inquiry letter, and one of the questions in this process was, what's your greatest ambition as an author? And I said, well, to sell the film rights for Habnab to Taika Waititi, but only if he can get Tom Hiddleston to do Hanrahan.
I'll be still my heart.
He's just perfect.
I know.
Alrighty,
I've
just
found
going
a few
back to
things. Anyway, go back to conquering.
Back to conquering heaven. There's always a single idea that sparks the story. For me, it was watching a National Geographic documentary on the lost tomb of the first emperor of China, Qin Shi Huang. He was an historical figure, and he was as bad as Genghis Khan and Attila the Hun and Hitler just rolled into one. He was horrible, but he created China, Qin Ah, the first emperor of China. He conquered 6 neighboring countries and created the superstate that is the modern world of China.
Was
He
this the
did this.
Golden Emperor?
I don't know if he was referred to as the Golden Emperor. He's probably
Okay.
referred to as the bright, bloody red emperor because he was bloodthirsty and murderous. And he was also terrified of his comeuppance in the afterlife. So he created a tomb that was a marvel. And there's only one reference to this. And huge shout out to Logan librarians. I was wanting to get hold of the Annals of the Grand Historian by Sima Qian. This is a very, very rare text that outside an Asian history department somewhere in the world, you would never have your chance to actually find it. Oh, no. That did not deter the Logan librarians. My goodness, they took that as a challenge. They went and got me a 2-hour access pass to Cornell University.
Oh my goodness.
I got to see a digitized copy of the Annals of the Grand Historian Sima Qian, thanks to the dedicated efforts of the Logan librarians. So if you're watching, much love.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
What, librarians are some form of witches or mages. They are some form of arcanic being, not archaic, but they are made of magic.
I think secular magic for the real world.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Practical magic.
Practical magic. That one's already taken, unfortunately.
Secular magic.
So this is the only written reference to the tomb. And it describes, I really wish I brought up the passage to read aloud. The 1,000 sacred objects were brought into the tomb, which had been bored down into the heart of the holy mountain and into the deep springs below. Replicas of magnificent palaces were built, and rivers were crafted from mercury such that they flowed.
Oh my God.
A representation of the stars was done above in precious stones. And crossbows were set to shoot anyone who might enter.
That sounds incredible. Oh my gosh, doesn't it? What?
Yes. So going back to this historical documentary that I was watching, there was this gorgeous Lacroix wearing a French Chinese academic, and she looked at the camera. She was reading this section about the tomb of the first emperor of China, and she just breaks the fourth wall and she looks up at the camera and says, "It sounds so exciting."
Perfect.
And at that moment, a character was born. This magnificent, elegant, groomed, cultural person who just couldn't wait to chuck it all in the bin and grab a fedora and whip and get on down into that tomb. So, and I found a whole heap of other stuff to go with it, but that was the genesis of To Conquer Heaven.
That sounds incredible. I love history. It devastated me to learn that a lot of the high schools are not encouraging their students to pursue ancient history, because it's through ancient history that we see the cycles of tyrants and we see the cycles of war and disease. I've recently found out, like, this is how important history is. 1920, so 2020, we've got coronavirus, and we're like, wow, how are we meant to predict this? 1920, we had the Spanish flu.
Yes.
1820, sorry, we had cholera
outbreak.
1720, we had bubonic plague. 1620, we still had bubonic plague. And then before that, we had smallpox, all in the 20s of each last century. To neglect history is to neglect the future. We need history. We need to know our history, and we need to make sure that it's publicly accessible for so many people to see, because it's so important. Like, you had to actually ask the librarians and let them work their magic, their secular magic, to summon up these things for you. But that's the gift of librarians, to able to do that.
Yes. I think there's also an arrogance I think it's a post-industrial arrogance that the world is proceeding in a straightforward trajectory towards improvement.
Nope. Always
No,
circles.
I think it's much more a corkscrew. Yeah, backward, forward. There's a lot of cyclic natures that we're only just starting to get a handle on it, because our mind space has been expanded past our own lifespans. That is the study of history. the lessons that one person learns being transmitted to the next generation, to the next generation. And I think that's also our job as authors, because history is also a fairly dry list of dates and important things that happen. But we as authors document people. What's it like to be us now? Well, we can write that down in a book, and we are effectively creating a message in a bottle and throwing it out there into the ocean, and it will touch somebody else's mind. Those words will enter somebody else's mind. And that is slow motion telepathy. It's
Very
a small
slow
piece of magic.
telepathy.
Very slow magic.
I like
Very
that.
patient.
The thing is, though, a lot of people feel like, well, I don't want to write contemporary. I don't want to write about today, but it doesn't actually matter because
I've lost you, Rhiannon. Come back. There you are.
I just said that you don't have to write about today. A lot of people are reluctant to write about contemporary things. But you don't need to, because as long as it has the published date on it, people know that it's coming from that era. We see things that are from fantasy, and we see the impacts that they have had and that they received from the time they were created. For instance, I love Dungeons and Dragons. I think most people love Dungeons and Dragons these days, but it used to be really racist. It didn't say different, or it didn't really say dark-skinned people or different skinned people. Anyone that wasn't white was bad. But what they would do is they'd say, oh, the orcs are always bad. You can't ever have a good orc. You can't ever have a good drow. And so and they would lock in
traits were racial.
Yes, they were. And now they're not. Now they're flexible. And you can choose whether or not to employ them. And so that's undergone a big change. And when you read the old Forgotten Realms books that are from the Dungeons and Dragons stuff, you find that they're quite sexist as well. So there'll only really ever be one useful woman in all of it, and the rest of them will be bar wenches or prostitutes. And that's how people played these games. And so that had an impact from the time that it was created, because it is like 60, 70 years old now.
There's a thought.
Yeah.
So I have another example of that. Gulliver's Travels.
Yes.
1720 or so. Like, this is one of the first ever fantasy novels. And it has also pretty racist things against the French.
Yes.
But there was one thing that I really took to heart, I'll never forget. There was a great concern at the time because there was a surge in literacy. And there was a generational divide. Younger people were getting access to the written word. They were being taught their letters, as they said back in the day. And that previously was if you're a smart kid, you receive your letters in the church and then you go into the church. So that power, that knowledge was retained. Only those church people would be able to read and write, and they would charge for those services to write a letter and read a letter. But now pretty much everybody could read, but their parents couldn't. So in Gulliver's Travels, there was a particular hysteria about inappropriate literature. There was a further hysteria about inappropriate literature finding its way into the hands of women. Now, Gulliver's Travels, if you remember the story, the climax of the piece is a dreadful piece of potty humor, where the Lilliputian palace bursts into flames, and of course Gulliver himself has to get out his massive fire hose and put out the fire. But the fire was started by a careless maid who had fallen asleep whilst neglecting her duties to the grill, whilst reading a novel. So again, fantasy can give us a great insight into the minds who shaped it at the time they wrote it. Yes.
Yeah. And when you think of things like Mark Twain as well.
Already. One of the finest speculative fiction authors, probably one of the first speculative fiction authors.
Great at characterization.
Oh, yes.
But
because he was such a character.
It's difficult to read those books out loud now because there's language in it that
actually was he the one? Oh, I'm sorry. We're a little bit out of sync here. I was just wondering, was Mark Twain the one who pulled that incredible stunt he wrote to some of his best friends and said, "All is discovered, flee at once." And most of them did. They just dropped everything.
I don't remember that. I just remember the tales of Huckleberry Finn.
And the Yankee at the Connecticut court.
Yes.
The court of King Arthur.
Yes. So there's language in certain books these days. Oh my gosh, another one, Tarzan. Horrendously racist. Like, Mark Twain uses certain words that you don't use in polite society today, and because they have really derogatory and harmful meanings. But he never used, I never felt like he used them in a derogatory or harmful way.
Yes. Intent of language.
Yes. Yeah. He was using them as descriptors rather than, but you still don't use those words today. But
yeah.
Oh my God. The guy who wrote Tarzan, holy moly, it's absolutely atrocious. Like the not just the way he describes things, but also the way that he characterizes anyone who's not British. Really, really cruel. I'd recommend reading it for historical references, but probably don't buy it. Well, don't spend money on that.
But the funny thing is, even though it was a picture of its day and its racist colonial attitudes towards the country that they're invading, the continent they're invading of Africa, there was a unique concept there. Well, not unique, but an unusual concept of cross-species adoption. There are tales, like it is a very ancient tale. Romulus and Remus, the twins who founded Rome, were suckled by a she-wolf. But just the idea that apes weren't actually, like, there was humanity within apes. And this is right at the time when we're talking about the background of all this is Charles Darwin's theory of evolution, origin of the species. Sorry.
Yes. Yep.
And just the utter backlash against that, but the backlash running into its own logic and binding itself up in knots and just sort of flushing itself out. So 100%. you can see the seeds of an enlightenment going on in works like Tarzan.
Yes.
So even though they're incredibly weighed down with their own baggage, you can see a little bit of getting better. See a bit of the future in the past.
And I think that people have been able to build on that, which is another thing that we contribute as authors. It doesn't matter. Every block is going to be slightly imperfect. It doesn't matter how. It's the point that you're putting it down, that you're allowing others to build off your work as well.
Yes. Well, ask awkward questions.
Yes. Yeah.
Speaking of awkward questions, I've got another 2 books out, but I think I'll set them aside because the major work that I'm trying to get representation for at the moment, but I have self-published, you have self-published, I'm not afraid of it. Go again. Habnab. Habnab. It is an ancient Middle English word meaning a second chance at luck. If you were playing dice, you were rolling, and you could see those dice were bouncing toward a snake eyes, you would go, Habnab. And that was your wish that you would just change that moment such that your luck would run good, and one of those ones would just slick over to a 6 and you won.
That's a spell.
Yes, it's a cantrip.
It's a little cantrip.
It's a little cantrip. So the genesis of Habnab was a real life experience when I was a very new mother and very sort of, I didn't even hold a baby till I had a baby. And I know that is quite a normal kind of experience these days.
Yep.
But I didn't really know what I was doing with them as a mother, and I really cannot express to anybody watching this that that's okay. Some people take to it like driving. Some people take to it like, no problem whatsoever. Some people go, oh my God, I'm piloting a ton of metal at speeds that are just, I'm not designed to survive the impact.
Manual.
And it's a manual. There's no parenting manual. Haha, let's just build on that one. And how do I turn this thing off? I had this real moment of taking the child to the doctor, and we're all going to empathize with this one. Suddenly the kid's perfectly well.
Yes.
So anyway, sorry if you can hear the budgies in the background.
I'm sorry if you can hear the boys in the background. It's Friday night and they're here to roll some dice.
Awesome. All righty, well, let's not keep us too far from our Friday night's endeavors. Habnab, the genesis of the idea was a moment where I had my baby girl in plan, and she was looking at the doctor and the doctor's looking at me, and she's watching this tennis match, and she was just so tuned into what's going on. She's a really magical little creature. And of course, I'm feeling like an absolute full at this point. The doctor gets out a checklist, and he checks the Edinburgh postnatal depression scale, as I later found out, asking all these questions about how well you're coping as a parent, but they're all very nicely phrased, and it's not really a straight progression. And he got to the end of the checklist, and he was saying, okay, well, and he picked up one page and looked at it and said, that's great. I think we're doing fine here. And then there was a scream from outside. He said, excuse me a moment. Out he went. Backstory was that a little kid was running around in the waiting room, fell over, cracked his head on the coffee table.
Yep.
Drums. Anyway, so I'm sitting there looking at my kid in the pen, thinking, am I right to go? I'm not really sure. Okay. But curiosity pricked it, and I picked up the checklist. So there it was in god-awful doctor's scrawling handwriting. And, you come down, all right, no problem. But then I turned the page. Do you have any strange thoughts about the baby? Do you believe the baby is an alien? Do you believe someone is trying to take the baby away from you? And I looked at my daughter in the pen and said, wow, if the baby's a changeling, you're doomed. Oh, and just bing, light bulb moment. That which we would have described 150 years ago as postnatal depression today was the sensation of my baby is a changeling. It's not of me. It's alien. It's weird. All of these sensations we would now describe as postnatal depression.
Mm-hmm.
But what if that whole my baby's been taken and is a changeling was real? Who are you going to call? Ghostbusters? I don't think so. You've got
Faybusters.
Faybusters. Call him the priest. So this sparked this whole idea that what if the baby had actually changed and only the mother could spot it, because Fae is sly. And what they're actually doing is trying to send her mad. Why? Well, she went and moved their stone, didn't she? Out of the garden, the perfectly good standing stone that was there. Oh, I'll just move this as part of my renovation project, and I'm going to repurpose the stone and make it into a fantastic benchtop in the kitchen.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Oh, no, that never goes well.
You don't bring fairies into your house.
But of course, the main character, Molly, is American, first generation American, removed from Ireland. So she doesn't believe in any of this nonsense, and boy, is she going to get a wake-up call.
Oh my gosh, that's fantastic. Give me.
So that's the first novel. And the second novel I'm currently working on, and I will be describing my plotting, my plotting techniques at the Logan Writers Festival. I'll be describing how I use Trello, a free online tool to organize my thoughts. It's fantastic. To organize my thoughts, to set character goals, to sharpen my writing and progress from first draft through to second draft, finding all my Chekhov's guns, all of my herrings, and painted the ones that are painted red, and just putting together the structure of the story such that the structure doesn't stifle the story.
Beautiful. Oh, that sounds fantastic.
And I'm up first. Not like I'm worried.
It's going to be so exciting. And I think your one in particular on the Friday, when so many students are coming that don't have a lot of money, they'll be able to use those free tools so effectively, not just for stories, but also for world building and for editing, for assignments, and making sure that they stay organized too. I'm always down for a free program. I love my apps. And I love the ones that are functional. Trello is just one of those ones that's really functional.
Yeah, it could be done not just as easily, but it could be done just as well as a bunch of different colored sticky notes and a wall.
Yes.
People do use that. It is a process.
This one saves paper.
It certainly does. And even better, there are so many awesome things about it. You can, but without prejudicing too much of my content on Friday. It's, you know how Minecraft is like Lego without the mess?
Yes.
Trello is plotting without the paper.
I love it. That's brilliant. Oh, thank you so much for talking with me today, Emily. This has been fantastic.
I should just introduce, this is my writing companion. This is Venator.
Hello, Venator.
Hello. Well, if you're going to be a supervillain and plot, then you need a cat to stroke. And unfortunately, I've got allergies in the family, so I have to make do with a plushie.
Oh, that is absolutely delightful. Will Venator be coming to the Writers' Festival?
Oh, yes.
Excellent. Well, you'll be able to take photos with Venator at the Writers' Festival after you see Emily's talk, as long as that's okay.
I think we can do that. You're up for that, Venator? We'll see what he does. He's a cat. I mean, he could be shy. He could just say, I'm ready for my close-up.
Fickle beings. Beautiful. Thank you so much. And you will be able to see Emily's talk first up on Friday, the 10th of September at 10 a.m. And come along to the Logan Writers Festival. You'll be able to learn about exactly how you can plot your stories with Trello and all of the amazing things that Emily has locked away in her brain. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Rhiannon. And just a little shout out to Rhiannon here. She is the convener of the Writers' Festival and is very generous with her time and with her experience.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We'll see you all on the 10th and the 11th. Bye.
See you there.